Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. So, I think the first thing to say is that we are Follow the Camino. We are the longest operating English language agency offering the Camino. We've been in existence for 16 years and we're very good at what we do. And our job is to help you help your clients. The Camino, as it's known, comprises many different routes. Now, obviously, all roads lead to Santiago, but those roads that have been waymarked are leading down through France, up through Portugal, and up through Spain generally, and culminating in Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain. And you can see all of the different routes here. We've marked them in different colorways just to make things quite easy, but you can see that the routes are many and varied, and we can talk a little bit more about that as we progress. Most of our clients, we have discovered, most of our clients are likely to be in the older age category. Younger people, many very young people will walk the Camino. They are unlikely to want to pre-book with an agency. So where we come into the picture and where you come into the picture is when people would like to do the Camino but don't know where to start and don't have the courage to just take themselves off and kind of wing it day by day, looking for accommodation and hoping to find accommodation. There is a race for beds every day for people who are just hoping to walk X amount of miles and get to the next place. And very often people who don't pre-book find they have to go further and further and may not be able to stay with the friends that they've made along the way. And this is our particular expertise, that we will make sure your clients are walking a distance they can cope with, that they have accommodation that will suit them, be it hostel style, which we can do, or more likely for your clients, it will be hotel accommodation. We can provide luggage transfers for them every single day, and we can pretty much customize everything to make sure that your clients are getting the best possible experience. Generally speaking, we would have people coming in solo, some couples. Very often we'd have 4 people, maybe 2 couples walking. We do also deal with far bigger groups. If in the event that you might have a school or college or parish that might approach you to find a way of dealing with something like this, we are very particularly good at dealing with large groups of people and making sure that people are in the same towns and being helped along the way. We can provide a guide if that's absolutely necessary as well. So pretty much every level of fitness, as long as you can walk and manage to cover 4 hours, roughly 4 hours per day. We have a lot of empty nesters. I see Caitlin has called them. I think I'm one of those myself. People who are either their families have grown up and they have the freedom, or they have retired and they have the freedom to take themselves off and do an extended trip. Families as well, lots and lots of families walking on the Camino, young people with very young children at times. So really the Camino will offer whatever any type of walker will need, or cyclists. Indeed, we do cycling as well. So you can roughly say the Camino will work for everybody. Generally speaking, 30 to 80 will be the kind of age group you're going to see, but much younger people walk as well, and even older people walk as well. Now, what we can offer your clients is an all-inclusive package. And by that, I mean, you will be handling the flights aspect. So you will get them to the start point that we will have agreed with you. And we will do all of the ground services, any airport transfers you need, the accommodation services, breakfasts, dinners. We have a 24/7 emergency support number, which is very useful if anybody has any difficulty making themselves understood in a hotel, or if anything happens that they feel they need some support, they can telephone us. I always tell people it's a really good idea to be able to send us your Google location. Because if you phone us and say, I have a blister, not you, your client phones us and says, I have a blister and I don't know what to do, I'm not quite sure where I am. At least if you're able to send our emergency number, your Google location, we can say, okay, best thing for you to do is to go back 1 kilometer. And that's where you're going to find a coffee shop where you can get a taxi or go forward. So we can at least advise people. The support number is very useful and gives people a lot of confidence that they have somebody virtually with them. We're not there in fact, but we are virtually with them. We have a luggage transfer porterage service every day for everybody who wants to avail of that. There are sometimes people who will prefer to carry their backpack. Fewer people we find of our older clientele will be happy to carry their backpack. Some do. But we're very happy to transfer luggage for people. So on their walking days, we will transfer the luggage from their hotel to the following hotel. If your clients would like upgrades, we can certainly offer these in the larger cities, in the main, in the larger cities. Some of the very tiny little towns along the Camino might have very pleasant, very comfortable accommodation. Very often it won't be starred accommodation. And this is where we would like you to trust us, that we know these places for 16 years. We know the places that offer the best in terms of comfort and welcome and food. And sometimes there might not be a star. So if we suggest somewhere to you that doesn't appear in any listing anywhere in terms of having a star, it's because we know it's the best place in the town. But upgrades, certainly 4 and 5 star in the larger cities, if that's what your clients would like, that's certainly what we can do for them. And airport transfers from any airport, we can give you a quote for getting to the start point. Now, we are an Irish company, established in 2006. We particularly specialize in walking holidays and in cycling holidays, not just the Camino, but we're mainly talking about the Camino today, but we do have a sister website with walks all over Europe. Many other options. If you are interested, we can deal with you individually and talk to you about that at a later stage. So our particular specialty is in walking and what people can do and should do. And we're all walkers in this company. It's part and parcel of the job. You can pick up the phone and talk to us at any stage, and especially if you have concerns about your clients. And sometimes you have to say to people, how much do you walk and how often do you walk, and we can give you a little fitness plan for them so that you can encourage them to get fitter before they embark on their Camino. But yeah, we're here, we're here to advise you, and we're a really good resource for you to use to make sure that you're offering your clients the best possible Camino experience.
One of the real people, the reason we put that in is because it's one of the things that we hear from our travel agent partners, our advisor partners, and our clients in general, is one of the main reasons that they've switched from other Camino providers to us, is because when you call us, you get a real person rather than calling and going through a series of robots or having to chat something that gives you generic answers. So if you email us, you get a real person replying to you. If you call us, you get a real person answering the phone.
Yes, and in addition, once you've been, I don't know if this is really the right word, but allocated to a particular agent, you will have that agent helping you with that client for the duration of their dealings with you. So once you get to know, whether it's me or one of my colleagues, you'll know who you're looking for when you phone to discuss your client's needs and your client's booking. Sorry, for one moment, I just want to go back to commission. We would, as a general rule, initially offer 10% to all of you. However, if you were in a position to perhaps have more clients coming to us, we would be absolutely delighted to talk to you on an individual basis about increasing that from 10%. That is not an issue. But as a general rule of thumb, initially you can expect that you will be having a 10% commission. The extra nights that you might consider adding when you're talking to your clients, particularly if they're looking at a longer trip, would be to suggest to them that they have rest days, perhaps build in a rest day once a week if they're doing a long extended trip. We have a huge amount, like a terrific level, 40%, I see Caitlin has written here, a huge number of repeat clients, because once they know us and trust us and know what we can do for them and know that we can take the stress out of the whole booking operation, then people will come back to us. And I imagine that once you develop a relationship with us, that you will also know, if your clients phone and say, I'd love to go walking somewhere, you'll immediately know that it's to us you should turn for help. And even in knowing how to talk to your clients about things, what we will cover here today is just scratching at the surface, but please pick up the phone and talk to us if you're about to embark on a conversation with a client and you're not quite sure how to present your offering to them. we can talk you through it. So we make this as stress-free as we possibly can. That's why we exist. We're here to take the stress out of the situation and give you a package that you can pass on to your client with everything arranged and organized for them and for you. Now, the Camino, although we talk about it singular, the Camino is, as I said previously, many, many different routes, all converging in Santiago. By far the most popular route is the orange amber colored route leading across northern Spain, not along the coast, across northern Spain from the Pyrenees to Burgos and Leon and onwards into Santiago. This would, over the many, many centuries and through the Middle Ages, would have been the route that all of Europe took. So anybody coming from any part of Europe walking to the Camino would have come down through France, down to the Pyrenees, and would have used this route to get across to Santiago. Being the most popular route does not necessarily make it the best route. Each one is as authentic as the next, but people often they refer to this route when they talk about the Camino. They've heard about the Camino Frances, as it's called, because it comes from France across northern Spain to Santiago. So many of your clients, if they ask you about the Camino, will be asking about the Camino Frances. But there, as you can see, there are many, many others. We'll go through them in a little bit more detail in the next little while. Now, if your clients call you and say, I'd like to walk on the Camino for about a week, the likelihood is that they want to finish in Santiago. So approximately a week will give them 5 or 6 walking days into Santiago, starting 100 kilometers away from Santiago on any of the routes that are leading into Santiago. If you walk 100 kilometers, which I think is about 62 miles, I should know. But if you walk 100 kilometers, you can earn your Compostela, your pilgrim certificate, and you have to walk at least that distance. So we will, in addition to booking everything for you, we will also make sure that your client has a pilgrim passport, which they can pick up in their first hotel. We'll have sent a little parcel, a welcome parcel to their first hotel, and in it they'll find their pilgrim passport, and they should then have it stamped daily, twice a day, if they're just doing the last 100 kilometers until they get to Santiago, where they can visit the pilgrim office and get their pilgrim certificate, which is something that people really treasure, to have this certificate. Many people frame them and put them on their walls. It's magnificent, written in Latin, explaining that you have completed your pilgrimage and succeeded in arriving into Santiago. You can fly. Some of you might find, in terms of flying to get at the Camino, many of you might use Madrid as a hub, but you should also have a look at using Dublin as a hub, because there are many, many flights coming from the States to Dublin, and there's a direct flight 5 or 6 days a week from Dublin into Santiago. So consider routing them through Dublin rather than Madrid. Of course, it can be Madrid. If they go to Madrid, they can get an internal flight to Santiago. If they're considering doing the last 100 kilometers, they should aim to fly in and out of Santiago. So that's what you would be booking for them. But you can use Paris or Barcelona or Madrid or Dublin as a hub. You're unlikely to find direct flights to Santiago. You're probably going to be asking them to make at least one change. But we can always talk through those requirements as you contact us about your particular clients and help you pick the right flights.
We have a question in here about the passport. So the passports are sent to the first hotel that your client will be staying in, or guest house, or whatever comfort level they've chosen. And basically it's a document. I don't have one at hand. It's a document that they can take to a number of different places along the way. And some cafes will have their own personal stamps. Different landmarks and churches will often have their own stamps. The stamps are a little piece of art, each of them. So it really is unique to the place that the people go. And when you get those 2 stamps per day, you'll probably get plenty more than 2, because there are so many places to get these stamped. When you get to Santiago, there's an office that's just off the square next to the very big cathedral, and you take that passport into that office. You say, here, I did it, I walked, and then they will process a beautiful certificate for you.
I actually have one of the little, you can see here, oops, it's probably gone blurred, has it? It's a little passport-sized little pamphlet, effectively. So they will collect the stamps as they walk. As they walk, they can just collect the stamps every day. But we will provide these for you. And these are a little way of supporting the cathedral as well, because we purchase them, and the funds from buying these little certificates goes directly back to the cathedral to help maintenance of the cathedral and help marking the ways and keeping the whole route going. It's a helpful little way of just collecting a little bit of money from everybody to help towards the necessary upkeep of everything. Now, I had been talking to you about the Camino Frances and explaining to you that it is the most popular route by virtue of the fact that it has been the most populated route with pilgrims down through the centuries, the vast majority of people coming down through France and the Pyrenees. The Pyrenees act like a funnel so that everybody comes across the one place in this little town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the Pyrenees, and it's in France, so they'll only be in France for a few hours. They often won't even notice that they're crossing the border. There's a little notice and there's a little sign saying you're leaving France and you're entering Spain, but there's nobody checking any. It's a magnificent, absolutely magnificent walk through some of the most beautiful cities of northern Spain and the most wonderful countryside, through Navarre and Rioja, fantastic wine region, wonderful food and wine as they commence the beginning from San Jean through Pamplona and over as far as Burgos. Between Burgos and Leon, they will come across the Meseta, the flat plain. They will cross the plain, which is just the northern tip of it. So it's quite flat. If you had people wanting to walk a section that was flatter than many others, you could encourage them to do this if they didn't particularly want to reach Santiago. It's a good section if they're very, very worried. After Leon, as you start the approach again into Sarria, it does become hillier. Now, when I say hillier, anybody can do this. This is not something you need to be worried about or need any special equipment to do. Anybody, if you can walk, you can do this. But just bear in mind there's mountainy, hilly section at the beginning, hilly section at the end, and quite a flat section in the beginning.
Some of our clients will also sort of say, how can I do this in a slightly shorter time frame? So if you want to do the whole of the Camino Frances, which I highly recommend, it's a beautiful experience, that flat piece in the middle, there is the option to add a bit of cycling in there. So because it's sort of long and flat, the scenery is a bit more consistent. If you want to kind of fast forward through the flat piece, you can rent a bicycle for a week and you can fast forward a little bit through that middle piece. We can combine cycling and walking if that's something that your client is looking for.
Absolutely. I never even thought to mention that at this stage, but it's certainly true. If somebody wanted to cycle the middle section, we can have a bike delivered to wherever they need the bike to start from, and they can just cycle it for the few days until they surrender the bike, leave it in the hotel, and we'll pick it up. They don't have to worry about the bike. We'll collect it the following day. So they just need to do the cycling across that section. If people had less time, it can be a good way of covering the full distance and in fewer days. This particular walk would normally take about 35 walking days. That would be 34 nights. And that's before you would build in a rest day here and there, maybe an extra night in Santiago, anything like that. I advise you about the options that they might add as we develop a relationship with you and as you contact us with your clients, about your clients. Now, the Camino Portugués would be the next most popular route. It's becoming very well known now, and it obviously leads from Lisbon up to Santiago, and it would typically have had mainly Portuguese people, but there would have been people coming probably from Africa, I don't know, the Azores. I'm sure there were people coming from all sorts of places by boat into Lisbon at some stage or another. But now it would mainly be either Portuguese pilgrims or people that would be our clients and your clients starting in Lisbon. This is about 28 days, this full walk. And between Lisbon and Porto would be less walked. It would be a little bit quieter. So you would have to say to the middle, it would be less busy. Certainly than the Camino Frances. Very beautiful, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful little towns and cities to visit along the way. It is inland. It's an inland route as far as Porto. And from Porto to Santiago, you have the interesting option of having your clients walk by the coast, which is the little purple route you can see in front of you now, or to stay inland and walk up through Tui and out of Portugal across the Minho River into Spain. So it's the Camino Portuguese, but bear in mind, if they only want to walk the last 100 kilometers, they will be entirely in Spain, even though it's going to be called the Camino Portuguese. They will be, if they're just doing their 1 week and looking for their certificate, they'll be starting in Tui or at the little seaside town of Oia, and both of those are in Spain. So they won't be traveling from Portugal to Spain if they're just doing that last little section.
A lot of people will walk, just in the chat, Fiona has said she's got people starting in Porto, which is a great option because it means you do get that little bit of Portugal before you head up into Spain. So you can combine 2 sections, 5 sections, 3 sections, the first section and the last section. All of that is possible, and we can organize transfers and things between sections if that's something you're interested as well in as well.
Certainly. And they'll notice, those people who are starting further south from Porto will notice an increase in the number of pilgrims that they meet on the road. So where it will be quieter. Now, by quiet, I don't mean there'll be nobody around. There will always be pilgrims around, especially from Easter. Usually the walking season starts around Easter up until certainly mid to late October. You will always find people. You're walking along, you'll see people ahead of you, or if you turn around, you'll see people behind you. You can engage with them if you wish, or you can keep your head to yourself and walk on your own. But when I say quiet, I don't mean lonely, unless you choose to be alone and keep your head to yourself. So from Lisbon to Porto, it will be quiet. From Porto to Santiago, they will notice far many more people around, and it's more sociable. And either by the coast or inland through Tui, both are very, very popular and very beautiful. Different coastal route from Porto to Oia is spectacularly beautiful. The coast is wonderful. Inland, you'll be walking through, if any of your clients or if any of you are wine drinkers, you'll be walking through Albarino country, so through lots of little vineyards and beautiful little paths going through vineyards. There's, like any walk, you have to approach towns, and where you have to approach towns, you're going to be on roads. They are mainly very quiet little roads. Where possible, they have the route of the Camino off any main roads, apart from just exiting Lisbon, but we have a way around that as well. Walking out of any big city is always a little bit more difficult, but we have advice for everybody about every single thing that you could possibly do. This is a fantastic route if you have families, particularly the section from Porto to Santiago along the coast, because if they bring their swimming costumes, they can stop. You can stop and have a picnic and have children swim. Our boss actually did this with the founder of the company did this with 3 very small children about 5 years ago. I think the youngest was about 6 and the eldest about 10, and they had a ball. So small kids can very easily do this section, and you can keep them, entertained, and every child loves a beach and a swim. So you can keep it as a really lovely experience for families with kids.
You can also split your days. So it will take a little bit longer, but if you want to walk from, say, if you just want to do Oia to Santiago, stretch it out over a few more days, and then you can kind of cut a bunch of the days in half. So rather than walking sort of the 10 miles or whatever you might walk on a big Camino day, you only walk for 2 hours in the morning. With kids, realistically, that's like 4 hours, which is still very manageable for them. Spread it out a little bit, and that makes more time for fun.
That's particularly relevant for people who might, if you had people who are much older, for example, who wanted to do the last 100 kilometers. The section from Tui to Santiago has lots of little villages in between the towns. So we have a really good opportunity from Tui to Santiago to make much shorter days. The same actually for the French Way, the last section of the French Way. There are so many different little villages and hamlets along the way that we have a really good opportunity to find accommodation and make the walking day much shorter if you have people who just can't cope with the notion of walking a longer day. But we can advise you.
Or if they want to spend more time just drinking wine and
yeah,
having delicious food.
Watching the world go by is part and parcel of the Camino. So many benches, you'll never have seen so many benches as you walk along, where you can just sit and chill outside all sorts of places, and just on the bend in the road that you'll come across, you'll find places to sit and watch the world go by, or take your boots, shoes off, and put your feet into a little spring river and just watch the world go by. It's a really lovely way to spend your holiday time. Now, the Camino del Norte is quite a different experience for many, many people. We find a huge number of people will be interested in walking the Camino del Norte who don't have any special interest in reaching Santiago. So this is a particularly good route if you have people who say, I would love a beautiful walk in Spain, a coastal walk, and they have no particular interest in the Camino. So you'll have from San Sebastian, which is an iconic place for anybody to start their Camino in. It's stunningly beautiful. And in fact, I would say, without a doubt, if you have clients starting in San Sebastian, they should be spending at least 2 nights, if not more, in San Sebastian, because it is probably one of the most beautiful coastal towns in all of Spain. So typically people will walk for a week from San Sebastian to Bilbao, or from Bilbao to Santander, or Santander to Ribadesella. So the Camino del Norte actually stops at Oviedo. So typically, if people ask you about the Norte, those of them who intend to get to Santiago will be from Oviedo, joining on to the Camino Primitivo. So there are actually two routes tagged together in order to get to Santiago from San Sebastian. And you can take it that that would take them, it's about 23 days without rest days. It's about 23 days from San Sebastian to Oviedo, and I think just under 2 weeks. So you're looking at 35 days. It's much the same length as the French way to get to Santiago. It would be, again, much quieter than the Camino Frances. And typically, the pilgrims you come across won't necessarily be pilgrims. They could be people who are just enjoying a walk for a few days, fly into Bilbao, walk for a few days, and go home. And so it's a different experience. There's a different ethos, there's a different atmosphere, incredibly beautiful route. But for people, for those of your clients who might be looking for a more spiritual walk, I would not necessarily push them to doing the Norte. I would encourage them to either do the Frances or the Portuguese route, just because there's a different atmosphere, there's a different experience, but very, very beautiful, especially for people who are just interested in food, scenery, and fabulous walks.
The Camino del Norte and the Camino Primitivo are, because they're a little bit further north, there is also a bit of a cultural difference. It's almost like being in a different country. You've still got the same very friendly people, the same incredible food, but it's much more lush, it's much greener. When you get into Oviedo, around that area, you're actually seeing almost a Celtic kind of environment. And then when you come into Santiago as well, very green, very lush. You'll see a lot more cider than wine up there. So if you're looking for something a bit different, this is a great option.
And that actually brings me to another tiny little comment. As I was saying earlier, the walking season starts generally around Easter. Now, we have people walking since early March, but generally the real walking season will start around Easter and continue to, let's say, end of October. If you have clients that are wary of very hot weather, steer them away from July and August. So keep them to kind of April, May, June, September, October. If, on the other hand, you have clients who are living in much warmer parts of the States who are very well used to heat, they might be quite happy. You can certainly let them walk in July and August if they're used to the heat. Irish people, we wouldn't go in July and August. We prefer to avoid the intense heat. But many people are quite happy. And Spanish people, of course, will always traditionally walk in July and August when schools and universities are finished. It's a pretty much a rite of passage, a bit like American youngsters go to camp every summer. Spanish youngsters go to do the Camino. They might go for a week or they might go for longer, but it's very much a rite of passage. So in the summer months, there'll be many, many young people walking, particularly the Camino Frances, also the Portuguese. So all sorts, it takes all sorts, and every road leads to Santiago. Now, you'll have clients who will presume everything is going to be in Spain. And I suppose this is where you come in, that you can explain that they might like to spend most of their holiday time in Portugal and just have a week of northern Spain as they arrive into Santiago, or they might entirely spend their Camino time in Spain, or they might like to start in France. And this again is a completely different experience. The section of the path that leads towards the Camino Frances and goes down to the Pyrenees, the route that is waymarked is from Le Puy-en-Velay. And from Le Puy, it is an entirely different experience to what the French way would be. Obviously, the food is French, the scenery is French. They have a very different way of living in France in the sense that even farmers are inclined to live in towns. This probably goes back to the Middle Ages. They live in the towns. So there are many long walking days where there are no little villages where you might stop for. You're probably going to be buying picnics, or your clients are probably going to be buying picnics in France. So going into the bakery and collecting their baguette and their cheese and their pate and heading off on their day's walk. So you can say to anybody, prepare anybody who's going to be walking from Le Puy down to the Pyrenees, that it's a different kind of experience, and they will have to accept that they're going from one town to the next, but they may not necessarily pass through very many towns in between. Very beautiful. The French are particularly good at organizing walking routes, and this Le Puy route is on what the French call the GR65. They have these fantastic walking routes all over France, the Grande Randonnée and the Petite Randonnée, the lesser known routes. And we have many walks using these routes as well, which are not Camino based, but that's for another day. So I hope I've given you a reasonable general kind of view of what the Camino is. And I didn't really cover why it is. I forgot all about that. Any of you who don't know why it exists in the first place is because St. James the Apostle went to northwestern Spain to preach. And having returned to his home country, he was unfortunately for him beheaded, and his sarcophagus was sent back to his beloved Galicia and was found many, many centuries later in the little town of Padron, close to the little town of Padron, which is between Tui and Santiago if your clients are walking the last section of the Camino Portugues. And his sarcophagus was brought up to what is now Santiago, and the cathedral was built around his remains, and he is venerated. He's the national saint, the patron saint of Spain, and it's the veneration of St. James. So Santiago, the word Santiago is, as most of you will probably know, means St. James. So it's to venerate the life and to have a pilgrimage to where his remains are in Santiago, and you can visit them in the crypt of the cathedral. So it's all about St. James the Apostle.
And that's also one of the reasons why July is such a popular month to walk the Camino, is because in July we have St. James's feast day. It's a huge day in Galicia. It's especially big in Santiago. You will see massive people walking around. You'll see performances, you'll see art exhibitions, you'll see musical gigs going on, and performances, classical performances. Museums will have extra exhibitions on. So for those who are okay with walking in the heat, it is a fantastic time to be in Santiago, is for St. James Day. What can we offer for a solo traveler? That is a great question. We have so many solo travelers. Genuinely, loads of people will travel by themselves. We have young women traveling alone. We have older people traveling alone. It is a very safe and easy route to do solo. Barbara, in terms of accommodation, in terms of all of those things, how do we do solo people?
Very much in the same way that we do everybody else, apart from the fact that we will try to keep solo travelers, in particular ladies who are solo travelers, in the town. So, if you ask us for an upgrade, we might say to you, look, there is an upgrade available, but it's actually 5 kilometers outside of that town, and we don't really think it's really going to suit your client. So I would say accept our advice. If we say to you, look, go for this, don't do that. We try and keep solo ladies in particular in the towns, rather than have them in little slightly off-piste places. If for any reason at a particularly busy time, if we have no choice but to have them accommodated in a place that is a little bit off the Camino, we will arrange to have them collected in the town. So we will nominate a place. We'll say, go to such and such a cafe, and at 4 p.m. you'll be collected brought out to your accommodation and brought back the following morning after breakfast to continue your walk. So we will make sure that people are not walking on unmarked sections of road for any length of time. If it's a few hundred meters, that's a whole different thing. It's just if it's fractionally outside the town, but if it's any distance outside the town, and that only happens if we're under serious pressure with availability. But certainly for solo travelers, many people walk the Camino on their own, and many people are in fear and trepidation before they set off. And I know my first Camino, I heard about the Camino 30 years ago when a very famous Irish journalist walked the Camino. I was just out of university. I think I was in my early 20s, and it completely grabbed my imagination, and I could never meet anybody. Everybody I spoke to for 30 years would say, walk? You want to walk on holiday? And eventually, the person I thought the least likely was my own brother said to me, do you fancy walking the Camino? So eventually 13 of us, all from university, all set off, walking from Tui to Santiago. And after 2 days, I said to them, we can't walk together anymore because we're having the same conversations that we have at home about our children and our houses and our mortgages. And so I said, I'll see you tonight, but I'm on my own. And it was a huge discovery that it was far more enjoyable to walk on your own. And only then did I start engaging with people and started meeting strangers and having wonderful things to tell my family and friends when I met them at the hotel that evening. And if I saw them having a coffee, I'd wave and keep going and just say, I'm on my own. So it's a fantastic experience for people who are on their own. And when I eventually, at a later point, walked through the Pyrenees over to Pamplona one Easter about 5 years ago, I particularly spoke to every person that I met on their own that first day walking across the Pyrenees, because I was really interested to see who they were and why they were doing this. And I think I met about 12 ladies walking on their own who were, some of them a little bit nervous, some of them just absolutely delighted to get away from home and walk and leave all their worries behind. And it was really incredible to see. And as the days progressed, they all got to know each other, and you find the person who walks at your pace. So you'll have to say to your clients, if you go with people, you might all walk at a different pace. So it may well happen that the same thing will happen to them as happened to me, that everybody walks at a different pace and they'll link up later on for lunch or in the hotel. And you find the person who walks at your pace, whether they're in your group or whether they make friends with fellow walkers. You find your own happy pace, and those are the people. They'll be your little Camino family that will evolve as the days go by. But solo travelers, we love them.
Absolutely.
And we can mind them.
And if you do have clients who are a bit nervous, a bit trepidatious about the idea of walking completely by themselves, and they really want to walk with someone, there's a couple of options. We can add them to one of our Camino walking tours. So we do have guided tours as well as the self-guided option. Those go throughout the year. If you pop over to our website and have a look, there's a little tab there. You can see all of our guided tour dates. So if you did want to find a way to kind of put them together with a few people so that they'll have buddies right from the beginning, that's an excellent option. We have incredible guides who do those tours. They add a whole extra level to the Camino experience because you get a little bit of history, you get some culture. They're all at least bilingual. Most of them speak more than 2 languages. So they'll be able to chat with the locals and let you know what's happening, find out what interesting things are going on along the way. But also do encourage people, if none of those dates quite line up for them, do encourage them to think about going solo, because as Barbara said, you really aren't alone very often on the Camino. I walked the last stage of the Camino Frances last year in October, so that was already getting to the end of peak season, and there were still plenty of people for me to talk to meet, to chat with every single day. So I never felt alone or lonely or concerned about being by myself while I was traveling. And the accommodation that we can put solo people into is absolutely fantastic. We're not worried about trying to find accommodation for 10 people. So the whole experience for me was absolutely fantastic walking as a solo woman. But as I said, if you did really want to try and find some buddies for people right from the beginning, there are those group options as well.
If you look at the dates for our planned guided tours, you'll see that they always go from Saturday to Saturday. And we expect at least 7 people to be in each group in order to justify the cost of the guide, obviously. But what we can do, if you have a group of 7 or 8 or more people who would like a guided tour, we can customize a guided tour for you. So you don't have to slavishly follow the dates that we have. We can do it for you with whatever dates and flights you want.
We have had some couples who've asked for a guide, and if you're willing to pay for it, we're absolutely willing to provide that. We'll sometimes have family groups as well. If it's, say, we have multi-generational family groups, which is fantastic. So we'll have the grandkids, the parents, and the grandparents all walking together, or old school friends will get together and have 10 or 20 of them end up going as a school reunion trip. So if you do have those bigger groups, we can absolutely add a guide. Or if it's a smaller group and they really want a guide, we can organize that too.
And the last little thing I should mention is that there is one route that, unlike all of the others, does not lead to Santiago. It leads out of Santiago, and that is the Camino Finisterre, which leads from Santiago out to Finisterre, which was what the Romans thought of as the end of the world, because they couldn't have imagined that
the Americas existed.
Exactly. So it was like many, Land's End. It's the same thing. Land's End is in England, and Finisterre in Galicia, so called because they thought they were at the end of the world. But many people will walk either just from Santiago out to Finisterre, or as an add-on walk for about 5 days onto whichever route they have arrived into Santiago from. They will add on the Finisterre route. It's much wilder, more like Cornwall. It's wilder, very beautiful, and a little bit different because it is wilder kind of countryside to get out to Finisterre, but a really lovely walk, and has its own little certificate, incidentally. When you finish in Finisterre, you can go to the municipal hostel, and they have a little pilgrim office in there, and they have another little certificate that people might like to have, and people do love to have these little certificates.
Just a comment that our prices are very good. Thanks.
Oh, good.
We do work very hard to make sure that we keep our trips as affordable as possible. We know that in comparison to our competitors, we are well priced. And we also know that a lot of the accommodation that we use for our standard bookings, the ones that we go for because we know and we love them, would be considered by some other groups to be more luxury accommodation, but we consider those our standard accommodation and we price them accordingly. As I said, please do pop over to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube if you're interested in learning more about the Camino. Our website is loaded with blogs which have plenty more interesting information, useful information, and the other thing that we can offer for agencies, if you have a larger group of people, is if you have a specific collective that works with a specific demographic and you would like to do an informational session like this for your workplace, if you're interested in signing up with us as an exclusive Camino partner, or if you believe that this would really suit your clientele, we can organize to do a webinar specifically for you. So get in touch with us, let us know what you're thinking, ask any questions you have, check out our website, followthecamino.com, check us out on social media, watch our YouTube videos, and do get in touch with any questions you have. We're so glad that you could join us, and thank you. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you very much, people, for all of the time you've given us. It's been really wonderful, and so many of you came. Thank you so much.